Lysira stood alone on the balcony of her palace, staring out into the stars. The night was quiet, but her heart was anything but. The lights of distant planets twinkled far away, reminding her of what was lost. Her lover, Alex, the human soldier she had once shared everything with, was gone. She had searched everywhere for him, but no one knew where he was. The people of her planet had already given up hope, saying that humans were too weak to matter. But Lysira refused to believe that. She couldn't. It had been weeks since the last mission, when Alex had disappeared. He had been sent to a distant planet to secure a peace treaty between the humans and the other alien races. The mission had gone wrong. An ambush? No one had returned. The reports said Alex was dead, but Lysira knew that wasn't true. She could feel it in her heart. Alex was out there. Somewhere the rest of her people were quick to move on. They had their own problems to deal with, political alliances to form, wars to fight. Humans had always been seen as inferior, a species too young and too reckless to be trusted. Lysira had always disagreed. She had seen what Alex could do, what he had sacrificed, and how strong he was. She had fallen in love with him, and now, that love was the only thing keeping her going. The people of her planet told her to forget him, move on. But how could she? The bond they had shared was too strong. She couldn't just let it disappear. So, she made a decision. A dangerous one. She would leave the palace. She would go to the human colony herself. She didn't care what anyone thought. She couldn't wait for someone else to find him. This was her responsibility. Lysira slipped into the shadows of the palace corridors, making sure no one saw her. Her heart raced. She wasn't supposed to leave. She was the princess. She had duties. She had a kingdom to rule. But right now, she had to be something else. She had to be the woman who loved a human. The guards in the palace didn't question her as she passed. They were too busy with their own duties to notice the princess slipping away. Lysira had planned everything perfectly. Her ship was already prepared, hidden in a remote hangar. She had the best tech, the best weapons, and a single-minded determination to find Alex. Nothing else mattered now. Not her people, not her title. Only Alex. As she stepped into the cockpit of the ship, she looked at the stars one last time. The galaxy was vast, and she had no idea where to start looking. But she wouldn't stop. Oh, she couldn't. Lysira set the course for the human colony, hoping the stars would guide her. The journey took days. She navigated through asteroid fields and past uninhabited planets. Every day, the hope that she might find Alex grew stronger. But as time passed, the weight of doubt started to creep in. What if she was too late? What if Alex was already gone? What if the humans had betrayed her? She knew there was a risk, but she couldn't stop now. She refused to believe that Alex had truly been lost. The further she traveled, the more isolated she felt. The stars seemed so far away now, like they were mocking her. Her ship was alone in the darkness of space, just like her. She had no idea who to trust, where to go, or if she would ever find him. All she had was her love for him and the memories they had shared. But then, a signal came through her ship's communication system. A human signal. Lysira's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Alex, but it was a lead. A small human settlement was nearby. She quickly adjusted the course and set her ship down on a rocky terrain near the colony. The planet was desolate, dry, with no signs of life in sight. Lysira didn't hesitate. She put on her survival gear and made her way into the heart of the colony. The buildings were abandoned, their walls cracked and faded from years of neglect. It seemed like no one had lived here for a long time. But the signal, it had to mean something. She walked through the silent streets, searching for anything that could point her toward Alex. The eerie silence was broken only by the sound of her footsteps. Her heart raced as she moved forward. every shadow making. Her jump, she was on edge, afraid that she might find nothing. But deep down, she knew Alex was still out there. She could feel it. After hours of searching, Lysira found a small group of human scavengers huddled in a makeshift camp. They looked at her with surprise, but something about their eyes told her they weren't a threat. She approached cautiously, but as she did, one of them stepped forward. His hand raised in peace. "I don't know who you are," the man said, his voice rough. "But you're far from home, alien. What are you looking for?" Lysira hesitated, then spoke with conviction. "I'm looking for a human named Alex. He was part of a mission. He's been missing. I need to find him." The group of humans looked at each other, and Lysira could tell they knew something. But before she could ask more, the man spoke again. "You're not the first to come looking for him," he said quietly. "If you want answers, you might have to dig a little deeper than just asking around here." Lysira's heart pounded. This was it. This was the break she had been waiting for. Maybe Alex wasn't as far away as she thought, but what would she discover next? Was the truth more than she was ready to handle? Lysira's pulse quickened as the scavenger's words echoed in her mind. "You're not the first to come looking for him." She stood still for a moment, her thoughts racing. The man's tone held something she couldn't quite place: concern, perhaps, or maybe regret. Either way, this was a lead. Her eyes scanned the group of humans before her, their faces weathered, hardened by years of survival on this desolate planet. They weren't soldiers, nor were they diplomats. They were survivors. People who lived off the scraps of war and abandonment. "I need to know where he is," Lysira said, her voice steady, though inside, her heart beat wildly. She had to find Alex. There was no turning back now. The man who spoke earlier, his name was Markle, looked her over with a keen eye. His rough appearance suggested he'd seen things most people couldn't even imagine. His clothes were torn, stained, and covered in the dust of this barren world. "You don't look like you're from around here," he said, his eyes narrowing. "What's your story, alien?" Lysira didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him closely, trying to gauge whether he was trustworthy. This wasn't a situation where she could afford to make mistakes. She didn't know where she was, or what was truly happening on this planet. She couldn't risk putting her trust in the wrong people. "I'm looking for someone," Lysira said simply, "a human named Alex. He was lost in a mission, and I need to find him. I believe he's here." Marco looked at her for a long time. There was something unreadable in his expression, something deep, as though he were weighing her words against some inner conflict. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "I've heard the name," he said. "A lot of people around here have, but not in the way you're hoping to hear it." Lysira's hope flickered for a moment. "What do you mean?" Marco glanced over his shoulder at the rest of his group, who were now eyeing her with curiosity and caution. It was clear they weren't used to strangers or to aliens for that matter. "You're not going to get much from these people," Marco said. "They've lost everything they cared about. But I can tell you, this Alex is alive, for now. But he's not the same man you knew. He's been through ... something." Lysira's heart sank. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Marco. "What do you mean?" Marco hesitated again, running a hand through his tangled hair. "Alex was part of a project ... a human project. The kind they don't want you to know about. It's not just about him being a soldier. What they did to him, it changed him. His memories, his identity, it's all been twisted." Lysira's mind raced. This couldn't be true. She had seen Alex's strength, his courage. He had been the one to protect her when danger struck, to fight for a future where their people, alien and human, could live side by side. This news made no sense. Alex changed. But she could hear the truth in Marco's voice, see the weight in his eyes. "Where is he?" Lysira asked, forcing herself to stay calm. "Tell me where to find him." Aku gave a slow, almost reluctant nod. "There's a facility about 2 days' walk from here. It's heavily guarded, and getting inside won't be easy. But Alex, he's there. And you're not going to find him the way you think you will. You'll have to go through a lot to get to him." Lysira's mind was already working. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. 2 days, she could manage that. But she needed more than just a destination. She needed to know what had happened to Alex, to understand the kind of man he had become. And she needed help. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, meeting Marco's gaze firmly. "But I can't do it alone." Marco looked at her, his expression softening just a little. He must have seen something in her high determination that reminded him of his own past struggles. "I'll take you there," he said quietly. "But it won't be easy. The facility is well protected. You'll need more than just your alien strength to get through. You'll need to think, to fight, and sometimes to trust." Lysira's mind was still racing with questions. What kind of help did Marco have in mind? She wasn't sure, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. She had to trust him for now. It was a risk, but the only one worth taking if it meant getting closer to Alex. The journey was long and grueling. The terrain was harsh, and the days were filled with silence and uncertainty. Marco led the way, his sharp instincts guiding them through rough paths and hidden dangers. Lysira followed, closely behind, her mind focused on the goal ahead, Alex. But as they moved deeper into the wilderness, Lysira couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Marco was hiding something more than just the facility. She could see it in his eyes. Something haunted him, a regret that wouldn't go away. He wasn't just helping her because of Alex. He had his own reasons. One night, as they camped near an old wrecked ship, Lysira decided to confront him. "Marco," she began, her voice low but firm, "there's more to this than you're letting on. Why are you really helping me? You could have left me behind, but you didn't." "Why?" Marco didn't meet her eyes at first. He stared into the fire, his face shadowed by the flickering flames. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I owe someone," he said. "Someone who would have wanted me to help you. But I don't know if I can make things right." "Not yet." Lysira's heart skipped. There was a deeper story here, a story that might change everything. But for now, she had to focus on the only thing that mattered: getting to Alex. Whatever Marco's past was, I could wait. The next morning, they continued their journey, the looming facility drawing ever closer. And with each step, Lysira couldn't help but wonder, what had Alex become? And was he still the man she had fallen in love with? The 2 days it took to reach the facility felt like an eternity to Lysira. Every step forward seemed to push her further into a world she barely recognized, where trust was a luxury and survival was the only rule. Marco, despite his secrecy, had been an invaluable guide. He knew the land, its hidden paths, and the dangers that lurked just out of sight. But his quiet, troubled demeanor left Lysira with more questions than answers. The facility was not what she expected. From the outside, it looked like a simple abandoned research station, broken windows, rusted metal, and vines creeping up its walls. But Lysira could feel the weight of it, the heaviness in the air that signaled something far darker inside. Marco had warned her, but she wasn't ready for the truth. No one ever was. As they approached the main entrance, a sense of dread filled Lysira's chest. The door was slightly ajar, almost as if it had been waiting for them. They entered cautiously, and the flickering lights inside cast long shadows on the walls. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the silence, and Lysira's heart raced with each passing moment. Every instinct told her that they weren't alone. Marco motioned for her to follow him, leading the way down narrow corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were lined with strange markings, some familiar, some not. The air smelled stale, like something had been left to rot for far too long. Lysira's eyes scanned the room, trying to make sense of the chaos around her. Broken equipment, empty tables, and discarded documents littered the floors. This place was once a hub for military experiments, Marco said quietly, his voice barely audible. But what they were doing here, no one ever wanted to know. It was supposed to be a top-secret operation. They wanted to use alien DNA to create something beyond human understanding. Alex ... He was part of that. Lysira stopped in her tracks, the words hitting her like a physical blow. Alex, she whispered, her voice shaking. He was part of this. Marco turned to her, his face tense. They injected him with alien DNA, modified it. They wanted to use humans as weapons to merge the strengths of different species. But something went wrong. Alex ... He was one of the first subjects, and now he's not just human anymore. Lysira's mind raced. She had always known that Alex had been special. He wasn't just a soldier, he had a fire in him, a passion for life and for her. But this ... This was something different. The Alex she had known was being erased, transformed into something unrecognizable. She felt a sharp pain in her chest, as if her heart was breaking all over again. We need to find him, Lysira said, her voice tight with determination. Where is he? Marco hesitated for a moment, then pointed down a long hallway at the far end of the facility, to Central Chamber. That's where they kept the most successful subjects. It's heavily guarded, but I know a way in. Lysira nodded and moved toward the hallway, her steps quickening. She wasn't sure what she was expecting to find, but she couldn't turn back now. Every part of her screamed for Alex, for the man she loved, to be waiting for her at the end of this nightmare. But deep down, she feared the truth might be more than she could handle. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the temperature seemed to drop, and the air became thick with tension. Marco's expression grew more serious with each step. The people here. They didn't just experiment on Alex, he said, his voice low. They experimented on others too. And some of them didn't survive. You're going to see things. In there, things you're not prepared for. Lysira didn't speak. She couldn't. Every word felt like a weight on her chest, making it harder to breathe. What had they done to him? What had they done to the others? The door to the central chamber was heavy, and as Marco pushed it open, the scent of chemicals and decay filled the room. The walls were lined with tanks, some shattered, others still intact. Inside each tank was a figure, suspended in some kind of fluid, their eyes closed in an eerie stillness. The figures looked like humans mostly, but there was something off about them. Their features were distorted, almost alien. Lysira's heart raced as she stepped further into the room, her eyes scanning each tank. She didn't see Alex, not yet. But the sense of dread in her stomach grew with each step, and then she saw him. Alex was standing in the far corner of the room, but he was different. His eyes were distant, empty, as if he had lost all sense of self. His body had changed his. Skin was paler, almost as if it had been drained of color, and his movements were stiff and unnatural. His once sharp, determined face was now blank, like a man who had forgotten who he was. Alex ... Lysira whispered, taking a step toward him, her voice trembling with emotion. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers, but there was no recognition in them. He didn't know her. He didn't remember her. Lysira's heart sank as she saw the blankness in his eyes, the hollowness where there should have been love. What have they done to you? She whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Marco stood behind her, his face pained. This is what they do to people. They don't just change them, they erase them. They break them down, piece by piece, until nothing remains. Lysira's knees felt weak as the truth settled over her like a dark cloud. The man she had loved, the man she had come here to save, was no longer the person he had been. But she wouldn't give up. She couldn't. There had to be a way to bring him back, to restore him to the man he was meant to be. But as Lysira reached out toward Alex, something unexpected happened. His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, she saw a spark of recognition. Just a spark, but enough to make her heart hope again. Lysira's breath caught in her throat as Alex's eyes flickered. That brief spark of recognition burning through the emptiness. She reached out for him, her fingers trembling. Alex. It's me, Lysira. Do you remember me? Please, look at me. It's all right. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here. But before she could take another step, Alex's eyes dulled once more. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something far away. The man she had loved, the person who had fought alongside her, the human who had promised her a future together, was gone. In his place stood someone barely recognizable. Lysira's heart twisted painfully in her chest. She had come so far, fought through so many dangers, and now this. She refused to believe that this was the end. There had to be a way to bring him back, to restore him to who he once was. But where could she even begin? Alex, please, Lysira whispered again, her voice breaking. She took another step forward, but just as she reached out, she heard Marco's voice behind her. It was low, almost apologetic. You need to stop, Lysira. He's gone, Marco said quietly, his face shadowed by regret. What's left of him, is not the man you remember. Lysira spun around, her eyes blazing. What do you mean, he's gone? This is Alex. This is my Alex. Don't you dare tell me that he's gone. Marco took a deep breath, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. I didn't want to tell you like this, he said, his voice strained. But you have to understand. Alex isn't just a victim here. He was a soldier, a part of something bigger, something dangerous. Lysira stared at Marco, her anger flaring. What are you talking about? What's bigger than this? Marco swallowed hard, and his eyes dropped to the floor for a moment, as if he couldn't face her. I was part of the team that helped put Alex in that position. I'm one of the reasons he's here. The project, they needed volunteers for the human-alien hybrid experiments, and Alex was chosen. Lysira's eyes widened in shock. She staggered back as though the ground beneath her had given way. What? You were part of that? You betrayed him? The words felt like they were tearing her apart. I didn't know it would go this far, Marco said quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't understand what they were doing. I didn't know how far they would push him, and when I saw what they did to him, I couldn't just stand by. I tried to get him out to stop it, but by the time I found out how deep it all went, it was too late. Lysira took another step back, disbelief flooding her. You tried to help him, but you were part of the system that destroyed him. Marco's face twisted in pain. I know, I regret it every day. I wish I could undo it, but now I can't even look him in the eye. I can't look at what they've turned him into. I can't look at myself. Lysira felt a surge of betrayal, not just toward Marco, but toward everything. Her mind was spinning. The man she loved was broken, twisted into something else by the very people she had trusted. And the person who had helped lead him down this path was standing right in front of her, asking for forgiveness. But how could she forgive him? How could she forgive herself for trusting any of them? Her gaze returned to Alex, standing there, lifeless and cold. He hadn't reacted to her, not truly. And that's when it hit her, the one thing she hadn't been willing to admit. Alex wasn't the same man. He might never be. He had become a casualty of something far bigger than the love they had shared. "I'll never forgive you," she whispered, her voice full of sorrow. The words felt heavy in her chest, but they had to be said. "I trusted you. I trusted all of you." Marco's face hardened, but there was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, unspoken sorrow. "I don't expect you to," he said quietly. "But if you're going to get Alex back, you'll need me. You can't do it alone." Lysira turned away from him, her eyes brimming with tears. She wiped them away angrily. "I don't need you. I don't need anyone. I'll find my way. I'll find Alex, and I'll fix this." She was lying, even to herself, but she couldn't admit that she was terrified. Terrified of what had happened to Alex. Terrified of what would happen if she couldn't bring him back. Marco didn't argue. Instead, he stood there silently, watching her, his expression a mix of guilt and sadness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room was deafening, heavy with the weight of all that had been said. Finally, Lysira turned back to Alex. She couldn't bear to look at Marco anymore. She couldn't let his presence cloud her mind. The only thing that mattered now was Alex. Her Alex. She took a deep breath and moved toward him again. This time, when she reached out, she didn't just see the empty shell of the man she had loved. She saw a mission. She saw a way to bring him back, to fight for him no matter the cost. But as she touched his arm, Alex suddenly moved. His hand shot up, grabbing hers with a force that startled her. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition, clearer this time, more real. It was like a spark had been reignited deep inside him, Lysira. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it was him. It was Alex. Lysira ... Her heart leaped in her chest. "Alex, my gods. Alex, it's really you." But before she could say more, a loud crash echoed through the facility. The door slammed open with such force that it rattled the walls. Lysira spun around, her heart sinking. A new, more menacing presence filled the room and Marco's face. "Drained of color? We have company," Marco muttered, his voice tight with panic. Lysira didn't need to ask who it was. She already knew. The facility was no longer just a place of experiments. It was a battleground. The soldiers stormed into the room, their boots thudding heavily on the concrete floor. Lysira's breath caught in her throat as she instinctively pulled Alex closer to her, wrapping her arms around him protectively. He was still standing there, his gaze empty, his body stiff, nothing like the man she had known. But in that moment, he was all she had left. Marco moved quickly, pulling out a blaster from his side. He didn't hesitate as he fired at the approaching soldiers, but the weapon only slowed them down. They weren't just human. They were enhanced, engineered to withstand more than normal soldiers. The facility had perfected their experiments, just as they had with Alex. The realization hit Lysira with full force. They had created monsters. And now she was standing face to face with them. "Get down," Ko yelled, pushing her out of the line of fire. Lysira stumbled, but she didn't fall. She had no time for fear, no, only survival. The sound of blaster fire and the shrill whistle of laser shots filled the air. Lysira's heart raced. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Alex, for everything they had lost, and for the future that seemed so far away. She ducked behind a metal pillar, pulling Alex with her. The soldiers were methodical, scanning every inch of the room. They had the place surrounded. There was no way out. "Marco," Lysira called, her voice tight with desperation. "We can't keep fighting them forever. We need a plan." Marco's face was grim, his weapon still raised. "There's no easy way out of this," he said, his tone resigned. "There. too powerful. But we can't let them take Alex. If they do, they'll finish what they started. They'll erase him completely. Lysira's heart dropped at the thought. If Alex fell back into their hands, he might never come back. They had already stripped him of so much his memories, his humanity. She couldn't let them do that to him again. "I'll never let that happen," she said, her voice steady despite. The chaos around them, Alex, still standing motionless, seemed oblivious to the danger. But something in his eyes flickered against just a brief flash of recognition, of awareness. Lysira's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible? Could he still be in there, somewhere deep beneath the cold, sterile shell they had created? A loud explosion rang through the facility, shaking the walls. Lysira instinctively covered her ears, but she didn't take her eyes off Alex. The blast had come from the far side of the building, and for a moment the soldiers hesitated. They were clearly caught off guard. Marco didn't waste the opportunity. "This is our chance," Marco shouted. "Lysira, get him out of here. I'll hold him off." Lysira hesitated. "I can't leave you. We came here together." "I'm not leaving without you." Marco's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "You don't have a choice. I'm not making it out of this alive, and neither are you if you stay. You can save Alex, not me." Lysira's pulse raced. Her emotions tangled into knots. She wanted to argue, to defy Marco's sacrifice. But the truth was clear, she couldn't waste any more time. Alex was slipping further away, and if she didn't act now, she would lose him forever. With a final, hesitant look at Marco, Lysira grabbed Alex by the arm and dragged him toward the exit. It was a struggle. Alex didn't resist, but he didn't help either. His body was like dead weight, and Lysira's heart ached with each step. This wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. They reached a hallway leading to the back of the facility where an escape pod was hidden. The path was narrow and dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Lysira's breath came in short gasps as she pulled Alex along. Would he snap out of this? Would he ever be the same? A sudden sound from behind her made her freeze. The soldiers had caught up. A voice called out, cold and commanding. "Release him, alien. You cannot escape." Lysira's pulse thundered in her ears as she turned to face the soldiers, who were now blocking the hallway. There were too many of them. Marco had given her the chance to run, but it looked like it was all for nothing. Alex didn't move, and then, just as Lysira prepared to fight, she heard it. A gunshot rang out from behind her, followed by a heavy thud. The soldiers in front of her flinched, distracted. Lysira turned her head just in time to see Marco bloodied, battered, but standing take down another soldier with a powerful shot. "Go, Lysira!" Marco shouted, his voice hoarse but filled with a fierce determination. "Get him out of here. I've got this." Lysira's eyes burned with tears. She couldn't keep leaving him behind, but she had no choice. Marco had given everything, so she could save Alex. She dragged Alex forward again, her strength fueled by desperation. Marco's words echoed in her mind. "You can save Alex, not me." The escape pod was just ahead, but there was one last soldier standing between them. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Lysira's chest. She barely had time to react, her heart frozen in fear. But before the soldier could pull the trigger, something unexpected happened. Alex moved, with a speed and strength that didn't seem possible. Alex lunged at the soldier. The soldier never saw it coming. In a flash, Alex had knocked him to the ground, disarming him in one swift motion. Lysira stood frozen, her eyes wide. Alex had just saved her. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Alex's gaze met hers, and for the first time since they had entered the facility, there was something familiar in his eyes. A glimmer of the man she had loved. trace of his humanity. Lysira didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the escape pod. As she strapped herself in, she turned to look at Alex one last time. "You're still in there," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're still my Alex." The pod launched into the sky, and as the facility shrank beneath them, Lysira knew one thing for certain. The fight was far from over. But they had won this battle, and together they would find a way to win the war. The escape pod jolted as it broke through the atmosphere, the familiar thrum of the engines vibrating beneath Lysira's feet. The sky above the facility was a mix of orange and black, like the dying embers of a fire, and the stars glistened like distant promises of freedom. But despite the vast open space stretching out in front of them, the air inside the pod felt thick-heavy with loss and uncertainty. Lysira sat at the controls, her hands gripping the flight controls tightly, her eyes flicking between the instruments. And Alex, who sat beside her, staring out the window. His expression was unreadable. He was no longer the cold, lifeless figure from the facility. But the man she had once known still seemed buried deep inside him, locked behind the walls they had built around his mind. She glanced at him, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. How had Alex, the same man who had once protected her, become part of this nightmare? She couldn't shake the image of him fighting the soldiers, saving her when she thought all hope was lost. It was a flicker of something that reminded her of the person he had been. But Lysira knew the truth. Alex wasn't just the man she loved anymore. The experiment had changed him. It had changed them both. "Where are we going?" Alex asked suddenly, his voice hoarse but clear. Lysira looked at him, surprised by the question. It had been so long since she had heard him speak like that, like he was fully aware of the world around him. It was as if the fog in his mind had cleared just a little. She didn't know whether to rejoice or to cry, because, with that clarity, came a harsh truth: he was still a part of the project. He still had the alien DNA inside him. The same DNA that had twisted him into something unrecognizable. "We're going to find a safe place," Lysira said, her voice steady, though inside she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. "We can't go back to my people. Not yet. We need to regroup. I have to find a way to undo what they've done to you." Alex nodded, his expression unreadable, but there was a hint of something in his eyes, maybe hope, maybe resignation. But as much as Lysira wished to comfort him, she knew the road ahead was uncertain. She wasn't even sure if the person he had been still existed in there, or if this was the start of something new. The pod cruised through the endless black. The stars, a sea of cold lights surrounding them. After a few moments of silence, Lysira turned her attention back to the controls, focusing on navigating their next steps. But before she could plot their course, the quiet hum of the pod's engine began to shift. The pod jolted again, throwing Lysira's hands off the controls for just a moment. She quickly regained control, eyes wide as a faint warning light blinked on the dashboard. "What was that?" she muttered under her breath. Before she could react, the pod was hit again, a direct blast from the rear. Lysira cursed under her breath as the pod's systems went into a tailspin. The warning lights flashed rapidly as the ship began to lose altitude. She tried to steady it, but the pod was out of control. "Hold on," Lysira shouted, her voice full of fear. She tightened her grip on the controls, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The pod dipped further, and with a sharp, brutal crash, it slammed into the surface of an uncharted planet. The pod skidded to a halt, throwing both of them forward. Lysira's head hit the console with a painful crack. A key, and she barely managed to pull herself upright, groaning as the world swam around her. Alex was still strapped in beside her, looking as dazed as she felt. But he wasn't injured. "Alex, help me," Lysira rasped, her voice shaky. We have to get out of here. We're not safe. Alex's eyes cleared, and he nodded slowly, unstrapping himself and standing with surprising strength. He moved to the door, wrenching it open with ease. Lysira followed him cautiously, her heart still racing. Outside, the atmosphere was thick and warm, but it smelled of earth and something foreign. They were on a barren, rocky planet, one that looked lifeless, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Something was wrong. "What is this place?" Alex asked, his voice sounding more like the man he used to be, his tone more grounded, more present. "I don't know," Lysira said, scanning the horizon, "but we don't have time to figure it out. We need shelter, and we need to get the pod back online." They made their way across the rocky terrain, but as they walked, Lysira began to feel the weight of the situation. They were stranded on an unknown planet, far from any help, with no clear way to fix the pod or to keep moving forward. And she wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that they were being hunted or the nagging feeling that something even worse was waiting for them here. The distant sound of a low hum caught Lysira's attention. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at her side. Alex turned, his body tense as he noticed it too. The hum grew louder, more distinct, and the ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. Lysira turned to Alex, her eyes wide with fear. "Stay close to me," she whispered. They approached cautiously, moving toward a large, jagged rock formation. As they neared it, a figure appeared from behind the rocks. A tall, cloaked figure with glowing markings across their skin, alien, in a way that felt familiar, yet unsettling. "Who are you?" Lysira asked, her voice wary but curious. The figure stepped forward, revealing its features in the dim light. It was a woman, her eyes glowing a bright violet, and her skin was a smooth, translucent blue. "My name is Valara," the figure said, her voice smooth but with an edge of caution. "I know what you're running from." Lysira's grip on her blaster tightened. "How do you know that?" "I've been watching," Valara replied cryptically, "and I can help you. But first, you need to trust me. You need to put aside your fear, because you're going to need an ally. The project, they're everywhere. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Lysira's mind raced. She didn't know this woman, didn't know who she was. But there was something in her eyes, something ancient and knowing. It was as if Valara had seen this all before, and she knew what was at stake. Lysira exchanged a glance with Alex. "Do we have a choice?" she asked. Valara smiled faintly. "Not really. But you'll need my help to survive." And just like that, Lysira realized something. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. The sky above them was a swirling mix of orange and purple as the strange planet's two suns dipped beneath the horizon. The air was thick with tension as Lysira, Alex, and Valara made their way through the rocky, desolate landscape. Each step they took seemed to echo in the silence, and Lysira could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. They were running out of time. Valara had led them to a hidden cave nestled deep within the jagged mountains. It wasn't mucha place to shelter from the cold and the watchful eyes of their enemies. But for now, it was all they had. Lysira felt a strange sense of unease as she glanced around the dimly lit cave. Something about this place felt ... wrong. "What is this place?" Lysira asked, her voice echoing in the stillness. Valara stood by the entrance, looking out over the rocky terrain. "This is where I've been hiding," she said, her voice low and calm. "I've been watching the project for years. I've seen the destruction they've caused, the lives they've ruined. And I've seen what they've done to you." Her gaze flicked to Alex, who was standing silently by Lysira's side. His expression unreadable. Lysira felt the tension between them. Alex was still in there. She could feel it in the way he moved, in the moments when his eyes cleared. When The old Alex, the man she loved, would surface. But it was always fleeting. The alien DNA, the experiments, had changed him. And she didn't know how much of him was left. She glanced at Valara, whose violet eyes gleamed with an inner knowledge. "You said you could help us," Lysira said, her voice uncertain. "What's the next step? How do we fix this?" Valara turned, her gaze intense. "The project is far from over," she said. "They're hunting you, Lysira. They want Alex back, and they won't stop until they get him. They've altered his mind, but there's something more. They've tied him to something much bigger than you realize. The experiments, they were just the beginning." Lysira felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. Valara's expression grew darker. "They've been trying to create the perfect soldier, but they've also been trying to merge alien and human minds. He's a key part of that. His mind was the last step in their project. It's the next stage of their experiment. If they get him back, they'll complete what they started, and there'll be no going back. They'll destroy everything he was. Everything you were." Lysira's heart pounded. The man she loved, his very essence, was in danger. It wasn't just about saving him anymore. It was about saving his soul. "What do we do?" Lysira asked. Her voice breaking, Valara looked at her with deep sympathy. "There's only one way to stop them, to truly destroy the project. You need to get to their central command, where they're conducting the final phase of their experiment. If you destroy the core, the entire operation will collapse. But the journey won't be easy. And the closer you get, the harder it will be for Alex to stay himself." Lysira nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Then that's where we go." The next few days were a blur of travel. The landscape changing from rocky desolation to dense alien forests that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Lysira could feel the weight of their mission pressing on her, the fear of losing Alex forever gnawing at her every step. But through it all, Alex had been quieter than ever, his movements slower, more mechanical, and yet, sometimes, in the still moments, Lysira would catch him watching her with that glimmer of recognition in his eyes. The closer they got to the project's central command, the more difficult it became to keep Alex grounded. He was slipping slowly, but steadily. Lysira could see the signs. His moments of lucidity grew shorter, and the darkness within him began to take over more often. One night, as they huddled together by the fire, Lysira could barely keep her eyes open. The exhaustion had been overwhelming, and the constant worry about Alex's mental state was draining her. She'd never felt so helpless, so out of control. "You need to rest," Valara said softly, sitting down beside her. "No, this is hard, but you can't save him if you're too tired to fight." Lysira shook her head, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "What if it's too late? What if I can't bring him back?" Valara's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on Lysira's shoulder. "There's always a way, Lysira. But you can't do it alone. You'll need to make a choice. It won't be easy, and you'll have to let go of some of your old beliefs about who Alex was and what he could become." Lysira swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose him," she whispered, her voice breaking. Valara's voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't have to lose him. But to save him, you'll have to let him go." For a while, Lysira didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "Once you destroy the core, it will disrupt everything the project has built. It will free Alex from their influence, but it will also erase everything he is now. The version of him, you know, may never come back. He'll be free of their control, but it will take time for him to regain his humanity." Lysira's heart shattered. Was it worth it? The decision was painful. But Lysira knew in her soul that there was no choice. If she didn't act now, the man she loved would be lost forever. They arrived at the command center just before dawn, the complex looming before them like a twisted nightmare. The dark, metallic walls seemed to pulse with life, as though the very building was alive, breathing. Lysira's hands shook as she looked at Alex, who was standing motionless beside her. "Are you ready?" Valera asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Lysira nodded, but it felt like her heart was being torn in two. "I have to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Together, they breached the complex. The final battle wasn't just against the soldiers who were guarding it. It was a battle against time, against the very thing that had corrupted Alex. And as Lysira planted the explosive charges inside the core, she knew there was no turning back. The explosion was deafening. And as the walls crumbled around them, Lysira felt a surge of hope. But it was bittersweet. Alex's body collapsed to the ground and Lysira rushed to him, tears flooding her eyes. He wasn't herself anymore, but there was hope. There was still time. In that moment, Lysira knew one thing for sure. Alex might not be the same person she had known, but he was still her hero, and she would fight for him no matter what it took.